Hello and welcome to my channel, The Way What Is Truth. Remember to like and subscribe and comment down below. Now, I'd just like to say something about the Nephilim. Now, this isn't a favourite topic of mine or anything. It's something that I've been interested in for many, many years, ever since I found out about them when I was a teenager. But I'm not one of those types to go OTT about this. It's just something that I'm aware of, but I think to myself, let God deal with them. I've often prayed about them. I've prayed for the whole world to become aware of the existence of these unnatural hybrid creatures, which unfortunately the fallen angels before the flood of Noah, I believe another flood happened somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, maybe 7,500 approximately years ago, and it caused the last ice age that we had, Noah's flood. Anyway, before then was the first wave of the fallen angels which came to the earth and had unnatural children with women because they lusted after them, and then there was a second wave after Noah's flood as well. Now, in this day and age, whether you go on Netflix, children's storybooks, fictional storybooks, this culture is inundated. Well, I don't know about inundated, but there's a lot of stories to do with giants. You see giants in video games like Skyrim. I remember back in the 90s there being a video game on the PlayStation 1, which I never played, by the way. It was called Hercules. You know, many Bible experts and many Christians believe Hercules was also a Nephilim, which wouldn't at all surprise me. And yeah, I mean, it's just become part and part of our culture. You know, it's very similar to the dragon legends. Now, most people will say that if you say anything like, the word dragon was just an old word for dinosaur, which in fact it is, because the word dragon means terrible lizard, you know, like a big, frightening lizard. I think it was only in, the 17th, 18th century, somewhere around there, 250 to 300 years ago, I think the word dragon was changed into dinosaur as well. So that's something else to look into. But yeah, I mean, we're living in a day and age which has a very narrow secular lens. So you've got to be aware of something, okay? And it's that whenever you read about giants in history books, like this history book, for example, about the Druids, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, right? The authors of these books, they're very clever, very, very intelligent people, obviously, but they're looking at it through a secular lens. So they see giants and dragons and so on and so forth as being fictional. Like they say that the ancients were more superstitious than the people of today. It was like their way of understanding the world and how everything came into being, so they invented gods because they were scientifically illiterate and stuff like that. So you've got to be aware of this. They're very, very biased, these people that write history books. Archaeologists, historians, even scientists can be very, very biased. These people who you expect to be impartial are very biased. They're not looking at it through a biblical lens, you see. Much of this world sees the Bible as a book of mythology, as a book of fiction. It's not, it's fact. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to use two examples. Sorry, my smartphone is playing up. I've got an article here about, sorry, you'll have to excuse me. My phone, honestly, Lord help me. Lord in heaven help me, the screen has just completely gone off. Can you believe this? You'll have to bear with me. I don't know for some inexplicable reason, I'm going to have to put the password back in again. It's my fault for buying a £60 smartphone off Amazon. I do apologise for this. It shouldn't cut out until after 30 minutes. Literally, I don't know why the phone has done this. It's the first time it's ever done this with me. My phone is laggy at the best of times, so perhaps it's about time I got a new phone. Okay. Right, I've just put the password in again. Now, what I'm going to talk about briefly is Polyphemus. Now, I've read Homer's Odyssey, the first part and the second half of Homer's Odyssey, and I noticed that there was numerous mentions of gods like Zeus and Aphrodite and Athena, Zeus's daughter, and so on and so forth. Poseidon, the god of the sea. And it didn't take long before I made a connection between these so-called mythological fantasy gods, which these modern secular types will see it as just fiction. But I don't see it like that, because I don't think people would carry on reiterating and keep telling stories of giants and gods, because people were never that stupid. They made temples, huge temples, which costed so much money and took so much time and effort, which were erected for, even to this day, even from my hometown, in the province of Salerno, because my dad came from Castel Ruggiero. Okay. And in that province, in the province of Salerno, that's where Castel Ruggiero is. Anyway, within the province Salerno, there's a temple still erected, it's still in good condition, devoted to Athena, Zeus's daughter. That's just one example I could give you. I do apologise, my phone is playing up. I just don't know what's happening. I really don't know. I don't mean to sound superstitious, but I'm doing this video and all of a sudden this is happening. I don't know, maybe this forces that don't want me to do this video. My word. Anyway, I better be quick. Now, there's an article here which talks about Odysseus at the island of the Cyclops. Now, to this day, Cyclops Island is still there, so definitely check it out on the internet. Now, it says here, according to the Odyssey, Odysseus arrived at the island of the Cyclops, Sicily, while trying to go back to his homeland, Ithaca, to his son Telemachus, by the way. There, he and his men went into a cave that was full of food. This is just a basic sort of nutshell analysis of the story. Right. Polyphemus captures Odysseus's men. Now, Polyphemus, who dwelled in the cave, returned and sealed the entrance so that none would escape. Then he grabbed 2 of Odysseus' men and ate them. The next morning he left to attend his sheep, but not without eating 2 more of the men. My word. Right, okay. The man whose name is no one. Upon his return, Odysseus offered him some strong wine he had with him, intoxicating him. Polyphemus, drunk, asked what the kind man's name was, and Odysseus replied, no one. See, Odysseus was always the clever guy. Oh, sorry. My word, my phone, Lord. If you want to say well, I don't suppose there's much point in praying for me in the future tense, because I'm doing it now. But yes, I was going to say, someone please pray for me as I try and read this article off my phone. Yeah, so let me get to the part of the article. The man whose name is no one. Upon his return, Odysseus offered him some strong wine he had with him, intoxicating him. Polyphemus, drunk, asked what the kind man's name was, and Odysseus replied, no one. Polyphemus said that he would eat no one last for gratitude and fell into a deep sleep. Odysseus, having planned this, took a wooden stake and blinded Polyphemus' single eye. Now, many Nephilim giants only had one eye because of genetic errors in the DNA code. Right? The giants started screaming for help, but when the other giants arrived, they told them no one had blinded him. His friends thought that a god had attacked him and told him to pray. Odysseus's men escaped. The next morning, Polyphemus took the sheep out of their pen to graze, and unable to see, fell each sheep's back in case the men were trying to escape. However, Odysseus had told his men to tie themselves under the animals. The men reached the ship, and when they set sail, Odysseus boasted to Polyphemus by revealing his name. Odysseus's punishment. Polyphemus then asked his father to punish Odysseus, causing him to deviate from his planned route even further. Ah, dear. My phone. My word. Perhaps I should have just wrote all this down. You see, all this modern technology is a bit fickle, it's a bit finicky, a bit unreliable. Let me try and get back down to where I was. I don't know whether it's the internet connection or what. Yeah. Okay, so it looks like I'm more or less at the end of the... It says, yeah, Polyphemus was the giant son of the god Poseidon, the god of the sea. I wonder if they called Poseidon the god of the sea perchance because there was a base underneath the ocean somewhere, and perhaps he saw him floating in and out of there in some sort of heavenly vehicle, some sort of spaceship. That's just an idea I've just had. Poseidon and Phusa in Greek mythology, he was one of the cyclops having a single eye. Who were the parents of Polyphemus? Yeah, the parent of Polyphemus was Poseidon, and they always refer to the gods as being their parents, in other words, the fallen angels, of course, which the ancients would, of course, call gods. Of course they would. We're talking about supernatural beings which were bigger in stature, they did bigger, far superior in physical strength. They showed wonders and everything. Of course, they argued amongst each other on top of Mount Olympus. The gods always conferred there and spoke about how to deal with the Turks and the Greeks. Yeah, we used to argue with each other a lot as well. I'm not saying that the whole of Homer's Odyssey from start to finish, both part 1 and part 2, is complete fact. I think about 80 to 90% of it's fact, some of it's embellished, but that doesn't mean to say that these giants and these gods, which indeed were the fallen angels, did not exist. Of course they did. But some of it would have been embellished. It won't be completely true. Gaps would have been filled in here and there. That's how myths work. Anyone will tell you, anyone who knows anything about history and archaeology, most myths are based in fact, okay? And when you get huge statues of gods being made from one century to the next and huge temples being erected, have you ever seen the Temple of Jupiter? It's got foundations that weigh 900 to 1,000 tons. No way could men put those foundations there. Okay, I believe it was the Nephilim who helped make some of these temples as well. So get a pen and paper. The Temple of Jupiter. Okay, it had a landing platform there for the god. What was that god's name? Anyway, it was the name of Satan, an old name for Satan. The Temple of Baal. The Temple of Jupiter was made on the foundations of the Temple of Baal. Anyway. It was like a landing platform which the temple was made upon, and I believe Baal flew in his heavenly vehicle and landed there. That's why it was like a big landing platform originally. Then the temple of Jupiter was made afterwards. Anyway, without further ado, so yes, I believe that these giants and Nephilim, which are described in Homer's Odyssey, are in fact the Nephilim. Now, this is an interesting one. I'm going to talk about what's his name? Mogh Ruith, not Moth Ruith. Mogh Ruith. How can I get mixed up like that, honestly? Anyway, yes, I have an interest in the Celts, okay? And of course, the Celts had their gods, like Tyrannus, the thunderer god, which is very, very similar to Zeus. I wouldn't mind betting that they're one and the same. Now, Mogh Ruith, chief druid of Ireland and all the world. Now, listen to this very, very carefully. I'm going to add little bits of my own input to this, but listen and really think about this long and hard. Mogh Ruith, chief druid of Ireland and all the world. And in fact, there are legends in ancient Ireland that describe giants as having founded Ireland. So there's mention of giants from all 4 quarters of this earth. How can they be all made up? It's very similar, like what I said earlier on in this video, to all the dragon legends, which I believe were simply different dinosaur encounters. Okay, but I don't want to go too far off topic. Now, the name of this eminent pagan character means literally servants of the wheel. That makes you think, doesn't it? The wheel, flying saucer. He was thought to have lived between the 1st and 3rd centuries after Christ. The 1st and 3rd centuries after Christ, yeah, AD. Some writers regard him as the sun god because he only had one eye. Who does that remind him of? Polyphemus out of Homer's Odyssey. Again, genetic errors. But you see, these fallen angels created giants, and they didn't always turn out to be genetically perfect, or perhaps they were created with one eye on purpose for some reason, to perhaps differentiate them from the rest of the humans. But not all the Nephilim had only one eye, obviously. He figures in the medieval Irish texts as a powerful druid, and in common with druids and druidism in general, druidism was the major religion of the Celts, by the way, and the druids, wow, they had fantastic memories. It could take up to 20 years just to become a druid. Can you imagine that? And they did everything from taking care of court hearings to astrology and everything in between, to divination and everything. They were philosophers, and they practice witchcraft, spell casting, all sorts of things. In fact, they used to cast spells on the enemy sidelines. Sometimes as the soldiers were fighting, the Celtic soldiers, they were there doing incantations amongst all the bloodshed. Can you imagine that? Anyway, in common with Druids and Druidism in general, he was capable of marvellous feats and possessed of magical powers. His name derives from the word Roth, wheel. Mogh Ruith allegedly lived to a great age. Again, most Nephilim lived for at least 400 to 500 years. They did live for a few hundred years per Nephilim, they did. Some live longer than others, obviously. During which he witnessed the reign of 19 kings. So you can work that out in your head. I did the maths on this one. Now, depending on how long those 19 kings lived for, we're talking about a being that would have lived for at least 400 to 500 years in order to see the reign of 19 kings. Okay, he was the eponymous ancestor of the tribe of Finn, whose name still exists in the barony of Thermony, Thermagingco.org, that's in brackets. His mother was a young girl brought from Britain as a slave. Mogh Ruith had a splendid chariot of Fingurine, white bronze or white gold, set with shining gems. Now, what does that sound like to you? Shining, white gold? It sounds like a spacecraft to me, which was being described by the ancients back then. To those who travelled in it, night seemed like day. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like a lit up spacecraft. If you go into a spacecraft at night time, it's going to be lit up on the inside of it, is it not? So let me read that out one more time. To those who travelled in it, night seemed like day. In it, he flew through the air like a great bird. How else were those ancient people going to describe that? They could only describe it like flying through the air like an eagle or flying through the air like a bird. Okay, another enigmatic Roth or wheel was the magical Roth Ramak oared wheel. Now this could be describing a completely different kind of vehicle, or maybe the same one that could change shape and serve another purpose perhaps, which is associated with this character elsewhere. Cormac, in his 9th century glossary, refers to this wheel as Roth Thael, the wheel of light. Again, the wheel of light, flying saucer. Or the Welsh version, Nôl, light. Yeah. In one of the prophecies attributed to Saint Columba, Colum Celi, the Roth Ramak is described as a huge ship which will sail over both sea and land. A fragment of this wheel was identified with a pillar stone which was situated in Cleghile, close to the town of Triperi. It was said to have had such power that it could kill any who laid hands on it. That's very, very interesting. Blind those who looked upon it and render deaf those who heard it. So we're talking about some sort of combat vehicle here that could hover over the land and over the sea. It could be referring to the same vehicle, whereas when people travelled in it at night time, it made night seem like day. It could be one and the same vehicle serving two different purposes, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, it was said to have had such power that it could kill any who laid hands on it, blind those who looked upon it, and render deaf those who heard it. Two further details of the tradition of Mogh Ruith may be noted. He was looked upon as the champion of paganism. It's hardly a surprise, is it? Because where do you think paganism originated from? It was Satan. Okay. Therefore, the enemy of Christianity. What further proof do you need? This is no fairy tale. Now, don't get me started about fairies, okay? It's too much for one video, too much. Anyway, because of this, some scholarly writers conclude that the humorised Mogh Ruith had learned his druidism or magic from Simon Magus. Magus was often used for druid in the medieval period in Ireland. According to ecclesiastical tradition, Simon Magus was, in a later legend, represented as a formidable opponent of St. Peter, and he attempted to demonstrate his superior powers by rising up into the air in a fiery chariot. What further proof do you need, my friends? Okay. Moreover, the belief that the death-dealing pillar stone of let me try to pronounce this properly. Can Macael, I think, was a fragment from the great Roth or wheel. in Roth Ramak strengthened the supposition that the wheel was itself an instrument of destruction. It was prophesied that the Roth Ramak would sweep across Europe before Judgment Day as a punishment for the way in which Simon Magus and others from every nation had opposed St. Peter. Now, this is where fact can get mixed with fiction. So, although this is based on true events, I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that this is based on a real god, Mogh Ruith, who had this heavenly vehicle, which today we would call a spaceship or perhaps a UFO. And yeah, but that doesn't mean to say that everything in the story is concrete, though. A lot of these myths are embellished, but through secular eyes, of course, we'll just see it as complete and utter fiction from start to finish. Anything to do with gods, giants, or spacecraft, fiction. I don't see the world like that. Anyway, the cult of the wheel is very well attested in Celtic mythology. There was a major pan-Celtic deity whose name Tyrannus means the thunderer. Again, I believe that Zeus and Tyrannus, the thunderer, are one and the same, similar to how the Vikings had their god Thor. It wouldn't surprise me if Thor and Thor's hammer and Zeus and Tyrannus, the thunderer god of the Celtic world, were all one and the same. Okay. One of whose most regular attributes was the wheel. I wonder why that was. Votive wheels in bronze or gold have been found widely in Europe, and apotropaic jewellery, you have to excuse me, I don't know how to pronounce all these words. Apotropaic jewellery on which the sacred wheel is portrayed is prolific in the Celtic period. So I think that perhaps we saw this heavenly vehicle which had a round shape. Not all heavenly vehicles and spaceships have a round shape, by the way, but perhaps this one did. Hence how the cult of the wheel started in the first place. Vessels, perhaps for sacred purposes of pottery or metal, were also frequently decorated with this most sacred Celtic symbol. Ask yourself, folks, how did the wheel become a sacred Celtic symbol? Could it be that we saw this god, who they called Mogh Ruith, this guy who lived for hundreds of years, saw the reign of 19 kings and had special magical powers, the enemy of St. Peter? Think about it. Anyway, vessels, perhaps for sacred purposes of pottery or metal, were also frequently decorated with this most sacred Celtic symbol. The invention of wheel transport, of course, obviously revolutionised man's capacity for wider travel. And in the Latin period of new technology of heating an iron and shrinking it onto the wooden felloe, rendered the completed artefact infinitely more efficient and durable and allowed greater distances to be covered with less damage to the wheel. Okay, the wheel was both a symbolic object, parallels of the sun disk are obvious, and the attribute of several powerful Celtic deities, especially Tyrannus the Thunderer. If she's saying, this lady, especially Tyrannus the Thunderer, that must have been their primary god, in the same way that Zeus was the primary father of the gods in Greek mythology, and how the Vikings had Thor, the god of thunder, in theirs as well as being an object of very real practical value in transport, especially after the invention of iron tyres. Now, thank you so much if you're still watching. Remember to comment down below if you've got anything you'd like to add to this video, definitely. Now I'm going to end it by reading out of the book of Enoch. Okay. Now it's about the fall of the angels, the demoralisation of mankind, the intercession of the angels on behalf of mankind, the dooms pronounced by God on the angels, and the messianic kingdom. That describes the whole of the chapter, but I won't be reading all of it. Okay. Anyway, without further ado, now I won't be adding too much of my input into this one, so don't worry, I'm going to try and make this video as short as I can. And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters, and the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them. This was not out of love, it was out of lust. Okay. And said to one another, come, let us choose as wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. God's angels were never supposed to have relations with women. That's pretty obvious, right? That's common sense. And it's a complete and utter abomination to God. It's one of the worst sins that has ever been committed within this solar system and on this earth. Right? Come, let us choose as wives from among the children of men and begetters children. And Samjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. So they had a lot of time to think about it. Now, because of free will, unfortunately, sin and rebellion against God and his creation was allowed into the universe, right? This is why the world is the way it is today, because of free will. This is why we grow old and die. Okay. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200. So it's referring to 200 specific fallen angels here, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders: Semizaz, their leader, Arakiba, Ramiel, Kokabeel, or is that Cockabeel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Azael, Almaros, Bartarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsapeel, Satarel, Turel, Jonjael, and Sariel. Okay, these are the chiefs of tens. Now, you'll have to excuse me if I haven't pronounced all those names correctly. I'll just like to say that I think some people have an unhealthy fixation and obsession with the Nephilim and the fallen angels. If that's you, then please don't be too focused on this, because ultimately it's in God's hands. But I felt that it was important to do a video like this, okay, because I need to raise some awareness of this. I need to do my part on my channel. Okay, so yeah, but it's not something that I'm overly interested in, although I'm acutely aware of it, obviously. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them, and they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots. In other words, they introduced drugs to them, and to mankind in general. This is before Noah's flood. But remember what I said earlier on, there was a second wave of these fallen angels and these Nephilim after the flood of Noah, and made them acquainted with plants, the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. That's drugs. I mean, today our mainstream drug is cannabis, for example. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants. In fact, many of these women died in childbirth, by the way, and of course female Nephilim had to come about as well in order to create even bigger giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, okay, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind, of course, because they were much bigger and physically stronger. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. This is referring to manipulating the DNA of birds, beasts, reptiles and fish, and creating all sorts of unnatural creatures that should not exist. And it's still going on to this day. But it's hidden. I think now it's more clandestine. It's more hidden out of the way compared to the way it was back then. It was more out in the open. And to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Okay. Now God allowed all this to happen. And he allowed it to happen for so long. But then Noah's flood happened because he was so angry and so wroth with the world that he had to wipe it all out. The old pre-flood world had to be wiped out, unfortunately. And then it goes on to say, and Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids. In other words, he basically introduced the makeup industry to them in a manner of speaking. And all kinds of costly stones and all colouring tinctures. Okay, so he promotes self-adornment, vanity, that kind of thing. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Almaros the revolving of enchantments, and Barakwil taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamziel the signs of the sun, and Sariel, the course of the moon. See, these fallen angels, and indeed the Nephilim, who were their offspring and children, had far superior knowledge to people. They knew about all sorts of things. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. Then it goes on to say this: and then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said to one another, the earth made without inhabitant cries the voice of their crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, bring our cause before the Most High. So plenty of people were praying about these terrible times that were happening. And they said to the Lord of the ages, Lord of gods, the King of kings, and the God of the ages, the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou. And all things are naked and open in thy sight, and thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who have taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven. There's certain things that mankind were not supposed to know about, and they were taught about things that they weren't supposed to know. Okay, in order to corrupt mankind and turn mankind against God. In fact, they wanted to corrupt all flesh and turn every single person against God. Okay, which men were striving to learn, and Semjaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates, they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suits to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. There was a lot of fervent prayer going on back then. And thou knowest all things before they came to pass, and thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them. And thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. And then I'll just briefly read a little bit of the next chapter. Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One, spake, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, go to Noah, and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth. Okay, now people back then mocked the warnings from God and about the upcoming flood, and they just laughed and joked about it, and they just lived their lives. They got married, they ate and drank, they enjoyed their relationships until it happened. Noah's flood happened, okay? So we mustn't be like that now. We mustn't have that mocking, scoffing attitude about the return of the Lord Jesus Christ, because it will happen. We are living in the last days now. Anyway, and will destroy all that is on it. A deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it. And now instruct him that he may escape, and his seed may be preserved for all the generations of the world. Noah and his family had to survive in order for the human race to carry on. Now, in my opinion, this was about 7,000 to 7,500, possibly 8,000 years. It's very difficult to say exactly when, but it was many thousands of years ago. Okay. I don't think it was just 4,000 or 4,500. I think it was a lot. It was quite a bit further back than that. And again, the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudal, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire. Don't forget that hell and the lake of fire were originally made for God's fallen angels. People only go down there if God literally can't do anything with them, unfortunately. And he hates for anyone to go down there. And it then goes on to say, and heal the earth, which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish, though all the secret things that the Watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. And I'm going to end it there today. I would just like to conclude something about the Garden of Eden from my own research, okay? And it's very much related to this, to do with the Nephilim and the fallen angels and so on and so forth. And that's in the Garden of Eden, when Eve partook of the fruit that Satan offered her. You know, notice how it says in the book of Genesis, I'll put enmity between Satan's seed and Eve's seed. We're talking about seed, we're talking about bloodlines here. It was Satan's bloodline. I believe Cain was the son of Satan, okay? And Abel was the son of Adam and Eve, and that's why that rift happened, and it's also why Cain is not mentioned in the book of genealogies, okay? You'll find his name isn't mentioned there. And this has been going on, this is a war that's been waging for a long, long time. It's to do with bloodlines, it's to do with trying to corrupt mankind, and it's still happening now. Just look at the music industry, just look at how drugs are being promoted left, right and centre. Cannabis has become the norm. It's just a recreational, harmless thing. That's how most people see it. Well, I don't know about most, but a good bulk of people do. I haven't done much research I haven't looked at any opinion polls on that one, but yeah, it's happening now. Okay, we have the Illuminati, we have the powers that be that exist above the government, and these prime ministers and members of parliament and these kings and queens, these world leaders today are just puppets on strings. The real powers behind it all is Satan, okay? And these fallen angels, the very powerful beings. We've had contact with the military, with governments on the earth. The governments don't always tell you everything that there is to know, because they don't want mass panic. They don't want to tell people the truth about the aliens, which have in fact been manufactured by the fallen angels, about how the military has been having business with these fallen angels, with these aliens, these manufactured creatures, and all different races of aliens that have been manufactured by the fallen angels. They don't want people to know about it, how they've shared technology with them and all the rest of it. In fact, there was a news article recently on the internet about how the governments of the earth, including in the United Kingdom where I live, are getting ready to meet aliens and everything. And it's crazy. It's just an established fact that aliens exist now, and that this UFO phenomenon is real. It's up to people how they interpret that. Okay, I don't want this video to go on for too long. I did originally want to make it about 25 minutes long, but it went on and on and on. Anyway, I hope and pray that you've enjoyed this video. Definitely comment down below if you've got anything to add to this. And if you want me to pray about anything, tell me. If you want to chat about something that perhaps isn't even related to this video, then feel free to do so, okay? And check out my other vids too. I hope you're all well, and bye-bye, and take care.